Hey there, welcome back to the Craft Your Comeback Show. AJ MacQuarrie here, and I'm super excited about this episode because it's going to be one of the last episodes. There are about 3 more episodes left to this series. The book is coming out soon. I'm super excited about that, so stay tuned for that. But I wanted to just dive a little bit deep into a concept here that's in the book. It's actually the subtitle of the book. It's the 3 F's, so failures, flukes, and F-ups. So the concept is pretty simple. It's just categorizing your setback, okay? So whenever you encounter a setback, like whatever you're going through, it's important to categorize it, to go through this framework that I put in the book. Why is that important? Because you're going to respond to the setback differently depending on what category it fits under. So the 3 F's, failures, flukes, F-ups. Let's talk about F-ups. They are completely in your control. It's your doing. It's something that you really messed up on, okay? It's often a big setback. These sometimes hurt the most. You need to own it. You need to take full responsibility for it, and you need to apologize, most likely, because you probably impacted other people's lives in one way or another, in a negative way, right? Depending on how big the F-up is. Now, this is a very important part because you ought to have some form of remorse. It's important to be remorseful. So my big F-up that I talk about a lot, it's a big part of the book, is my bankruptcy. And as my coach taught me, she taught me many times when we worked through it, and even my therapist and I have talked about it a lot, you need to forgive yourself when you F up. So be remorseful, but also be forgiving to yourself. So going from one F to the other, right? Going from the F up, going to F up to forgiveness. So when we F up, the ball is ultimately in your court. Go through the process, be remorseful, be apologetic, sit in your pain for a little while, whatever it is you have to go through. But ultimately, you want to move on from it and forgive yourself for effing up, because we all make mistakes and we're allowed to make mistakes. And we're all going to F up in one way or another, right? So when you experience an F up, just go through that and forgive yourself and move on. Now, let's talk about flukes. This is kind of on the other side of the what's in your control and what's not in your control. When you go through a fluke, it is totally out of your control, right? You have nothing to do with it. Flukes happen to you, whereas F-ups, you make them happen, okay? So you cause the F-up, you do not cause the fluke. It is something that happens to you. So since flukes happen to you and fluke is out of your control, you have no control over it, right? It's not your responsibility directly. But what is your responsibility is how you respond to the fluke, how you move on from the fluke, how you handle the fluke. How you respond to it is crucial. It's like they say, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to it, right? Flukes can be the most challenging ones to overcome. They often come in the form of tragedies, traumas, deaths. There are things like cancer, natural disasters. It's something that's totally out of your control. Some noteworthy flukes that I talk about in the book: the tragic death of my first love. The car accident was a fluke. Flukes can really F you the F up. While you have no control over it, it doesn't mean that it won't hurt you any less, right? But it's a fluke. It's out of your control. So you really can't do anything about it. And because it's out of your hands, we're gonna go again from one F to the other. We're gonna go from fluke to forward, because you just have to move forward. Easier said than done. Trust me, I know. And then we have, last but not least, the failure. Now, a failure is a mix of both in your control and out of control. So you're trying to achieve something, you have some goal in mind, some destination in mind. Some outside force says no, okay? Failing an exam is a great example of a failure. You took the exam, you maybe didn't study for it, the professor read your answers and graded it appropriately. The positive thing about the failure is there are some aspects that are in your control, right? So you can focus on what you can control. And the part that's not in your control is feedback. So you get instant feedback often when you have a failure. So you know what to do next time, and you're gonna find the lessons in that feedback, and you're gonna learn from it, and you're gonna grow from it. Some of the failures that I talk about in the book are flunking out of college. The first time I went to school, I dropped out, so I was a college dropout for a little while. I talk about my Dragon's Den experience, not getting a deal on Dragon's Den and getting called Cockroach by Kevin O'Leary. A failure, in my opinion, is a little bit easier to navigate than the rest. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt any less like all the others, but they're often easier to recover from. And like I said, you're getting feedback. So we're going from one F to the other, from failure to feedback. So it's important to just label your setback, okay? Put them in a box. For whatever reason, don't ask me why, we want things categorized as humans. We want labels. As much as we try to fight labels, we want labels. And that's just how we work. That's how we were programmed, probably because it had something to do with us and survival. But I want to just say something before we end here. Not everything is so black and white in life, right? Like, obviously, there is so much gray in this world. Everything is not so definitive. So your setback might be a mix of everything or two things. Like an example is like my bankruptcy. I own it as my F up. I made mistakes. But many people go bankrupt not because of their wrongdoing. It might be some outside force that forced them into a bankruptcy. When the volcanoes erupted in Hawaii a few years back and the Big Island was a mess, that really hurt the helicopter tour companies, for instance. And I actually remember a specific time I was getting an Uber in San Diego and I was talking to the Uber driver. I was actually telling the Uber driver about my bankruptcy and my business, and we had like a heart-to-heart. And he confided in me and said, I just owned a helicopter touring company with my wife on the Big Island, and we went bankrupt recently as well due to the tourist industry just collapsing. So that was completely out of his control. So again, it's just an example of everything is not so black and white. That's all I have for you today on the 3 Fs. We're going to talk about the comeback pill on the next episode. I am looking forward to seeing you. Take care, and remember, wherever you are at along your journey, you just got to keep going.